Welcome, scholars, to our first lesson of Unit 5.2.1. This is a lesson titled The Ming Restoration. We're going to be talking about the return of Chinese rule to China. Let's go. Let's look one more time. I did say that we were done with the Mongol rule in China, didn't I? But, we're not. We've got one slide on it. Let's just remind ourselves the fact that the Chinese weren't in charge of China for about 100 years. From 1271 to 1368, China was governed by the Mongols. Mongols were in charge of China, so not the Chinese. However, in 1368, that comes to an end with the establishment of the Ming. Going back in time, however, let's just remind ourselves we had Kublai Khan. He establishes that Chinese-like dynasty. They were the Yuan. Yuan Dynasty was not a Chinese dynasty, but it was in charge of China. And over time, the dynasty's hold on China does weaken. So Kublai Khan, big strong ruler, unites China. It's got a lot of backing. Over time, that fades, and we're done with Mongols. The Red Turban Rebellion is what really ends that. That starts in 1351. A group of Chinese rebel against the Mongols. This was largely because of poor management of some natural disasters, most especially some floods and a resulting famine. People who are homeless and hungry don't generally like their government very much. They join this rebellion, and that spells disaster for the Yuan dynasty. The Red Turbans see that weakness. They attack. No good for the Yuans. Sorry, Kublai Khan. We now have a rebellion in full swing. We have Zhu Yuanzhang. He's one of the Red Turban leaders, the most successful of those early leaders. He is able to, look at it, I actually put it on the map this time. We have Nanjing being captured by this ruler who's then able to centralize and unify his power base within this rebellion. With this base of power, he attracts additional followers. People flock to his leadership. Success usually breeds success in this way. If you are a military leader and you have a lot of successful fights, people tend to join you. We see this over and over throughout history. And by 1368, he had control of most of China. And this is where he establishes the Ming Dynasty. I'd put out that other number 1381 in another lesson. That's the complete unification. But by 1368, he had most of China under his rule. So he was very successful, this Zhu Yuanzhang. I always think it's interesting, by the way, that he's got Yuan right there in his name when he is the one who overthrows the Yuan dynasty. Just, if you're having trouble remembering who overthrew the Yuan dynasty, it would be Yuanzhang who did that. Now, the Hongwu Emperor. Who is this guy? It's Zhu Yuanzhang. He takes a new title. Once he becomes the Emperor of China, he becomes the Hongwu Emperor. So from this point forward, we're going to drop that Yuanzhang name and just call him the Hongwu Emperor. It's an interesting name. What does that mean? Well, it means vastly martial. Martial being a military term. So he is going to be this great military ruler. You can tell because his name tells you that. Pretty cool. I should rename myself. I like Hongwu. Hongwu, vastly martial. Maybe I'll conquer the world. Just call me Mr. Hongwu from now on. Never mind, don't do that. Hongwu is going to focus his rule in two main areas, right? He's fighting this war to reunite China. Well, he should be restoring Chinese rule. Chinese are going to be in charge throughout his emperor. So the Mongolians who had any sort of administrative control, they are out, they are done, so long, bye-bye Mongolians. Next, he is going to fight to defend against foreign influence. He does not want foreigners in his empire at all. He is very opposed to this, having seen what those dastardly Yuans have done. He wants just the Chinese in control of China. So you see how the two really tie into each other. Now, the Chinese restoration. This vastly martial emperor had to convince China to accept Ming rule. And as a vastly martial emperor, he is going to do so peacefully. No, he's not. He's the vastly martial emperor. What's he going to do? He's going to spend his entire reign fighting. He's going to be fighting against the Mongols and then fighting against Mongol loyalists and other Chinese rebel groups. He is fighting to reunite the emperor because he is the vastly martial emperor. So, yes, he spends a lot of time fighting throughout his reign. But in the end, he does bring in a more Chinese China. The Hongwu Emperor is able to create a new code of law based upon Confucian principles. Confucian principles had guided the emperor and the empire in the past. The Mongolians were very tolerant. You can worship how you want, you can believe what you want, do what you want so long as you follow our rule. The Chinese in the past had not necessarily been that way, and the Hongwu Emperor is definitely not going to be that way either. New code of law, Confucian principles were going to be more Chinese. These laws were based upon the Tang Dynasty. The Tang were the golden age, and the Ming wanted to reestablish the golden age of Chinese rule in China, and therefore they based a lot of what they did off of the success of the Tang. Now, another thing that our Hongwu ruler is going to do is going to bring in some absolute rule. The Mongols had used thousands of Chinese to govern China. It just made sense. They were a minority, an extreme minority in China. They had to have Chinese governing China. And this is part of what made them acceptable to the Chinese. The Hongwu Emperor wanted to erase the threat that these conspirators represented. If you were one of these Chinese that helped the Mongols rule, you were as bad as the Mongols, maybe even worse. We got to get rid of these people who might be tempted to support a Mongol restoration of power. So how do they get rid of them? They're going to kill them. About 100,000 were purged. Most of those were killed. A few were just exiled, but if you were exiled, you were really especially lucky. Mostly, the Hongwu Emperor just went through and killed all those conspirators that had dared to work with the Mongols. Vastly martial. Hongwu, kill people. Cool. That's all for this lesson. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.